Olá, este é o Poder Entrevista. Eu sou Eric Napoli, redator do Poder360 e vou entrevistar Andrea Stegher, vice-presidente da IGU, a União Internacional do Gás. Andrea tem 53 anos e uma carreira consolidada no setor de gás. Além de vice-presidente da IGU, Andrea é vice-presidente executivo da NGV Italy, uma associação voltada para a descarbonização do setor energético na Itália, e é membro do comitê de direção da Proxigás, a Associação da Indústria do Gás na Itália. Andrea é vice-presidente da IGU desde junho de 2021. Andrea, thank you for this interview.
Prazer.
Agradeço também a todos os web espectadores que assistem a este programa. Esta entrevista está sendo gravada no estúdio do Poder 360 em Brasília, em 11 de setembro de 2024. Para ficar sempre bem informado, inscreva-se no canal do Poder 360, ative as notificações e não perca nenhuma informação relevante. A partir de agora, esta entrevista será conduzida em inglês, com legendas em português. Andrea, we had lived in a period of extreme energy uncertainty. The world has been affected by the pandemics and some geopolitical tensions, among other things. How has the global gas market been dealing with this challenging period of the last 4 years?
First and foremost, thank you very much for this opportunity to have the conversation with you. It's a very important element, and of course, tensions are still around. So we have to be aware of the fact that we had some important elements of tensions, geopolitical, economic, health, of course. I think we discovered that we are maybe more fragile than we were expecting to. In this respect, the gas industry has continued to deliver energy to consumers around the world, but we can do more. We can do more for the energy growth, the economic growth, and the reduction of emissions.
What lessons have been learned from this period and what corrections can be made?
I think we have a first important lesson. The first important lesson is the fact that we have to be much more robust. And when we talk about energy security, is maybe one of the important priorities also for any energy transition. Because without security, you cannot discuss transition, honestly speaking. The second element is the fact that, luckily, I would say, the gas industry has been playing a global role. So it has evolved from a regional specific, let's say, environment to a more global glue. So the LNG, for instance, has been a commodity which has been moving around the world to allow flexible energy to move where it was needed most.
And Brazil has a lot of renewable sources in our electrical system, such as wind, solar, and especially hydro. What is the place for natural gas in this disputed energy matrix?
I mean, let me start with one comment, which is more global, then I'll go back to Brazil. We have to recall that energy demand is increasing quite substantially. We have about 2% a year in the last 2 decades. This means that renewables, which have been growing very fast and very productively, I would say, and they are to continue, of course, in that trajectory, I think we have to recall that we still have 80% of our energy need covered by traditional fuels. That's number one. Number two, gas has increased its role to reduce potentially the use of oil and coal. Back to Brazil. Of course, renewables play a very important role, but renewables can be variable and have no real predictability in many cases. We are seeing in these very days how the dry season is affecting power generation in Brazil. So gas has a very good, important role to support and complement renewables in many respects.
And the Brazilian government has made some moves lately to increase the supply of gas for mainly its industry. How does the ICU see these public policies towards the gas, such as the stimulating the gas that is reinjected in our oil wells?
Well, we are not entering into specific domestic legislation, but at large, as per the recently released Global Gas Report, which is, by the way, available on the IGU website, It's a report that makes very clear the need for having more investments and more gas supplies to become available to the market. There are two elements there. First of all, we have a lot of domestic resources. Brazil is one of the cases, and that's for sure benefiting consumers and security suppliers, as I was saying before. The second point is that we have gas also playing a role in promoting new gases as well. So our industry is very much committed into biomethane, hydrogen, CCUS, that is carbon capture, utilization and storage, sorry for the acronym, and e-methane, so it's synthetic gas. So there is an array of innovation that we can play with. Back to the situation, investments are crucial, both for the delivery of today's energy and for the innovation of tomorrow's energy.
In the last months, the Brazilian government has made some public policies to stimulate the gas industry, and we tend to associate lower gas prices to economic prosperity because it's a very flexible form of energy. And how do you think Brazil would be if we started looking at gas this way, let's say 20, 30 years ago?
I mean, it's always interesting to look at things in retrospective. Of course, with our today's knowledge, I think Brazil would have bet on gas much earlier. I think the important part of the conversation today is that we should not waste more time. So it's important to start this engagement to have more gas in place, because that's fundamental for the industry, for consumers, for the benefit of the society at large. I mean, if you look back at the shale gas revolution in the US, you have a very clear example. But also if you look at Norway, there is a clear example of how the Norwegian country has benefited from oil and gas production and exports. So I think we have plenty of useful examples to base the relationship between more domestic production and more production with economic prosperity. And that's also a way throughout which, let's not forget about that, we can reduce emissions. Because of course we have more polluting fuels other way. So that's where I think we have a very good example in Brazil. I think and I hope this will deliver a lot in the short term to give also example to other countries. Otherwise you will have possibly the need to import gas from Argentina, for instance.
Yeah. And what do you think is the role of Brazil in the global gas market? How does an international organization such as the ICU look at Brazil?
I mean, Brazil is taking a more active role in the international space. We are seeing a very productive interaction at G20 level. We had earlier today a very constructive cooperation and dialogue with the minister as well, but also with many other stakeholders there. I think the role of Brazil can definitely increase, because Brazil is not just gas, it's not just renewable energies, it's the Amazons as well. So it's a very important element that is preserving our environment at large. So I think Brazil can be also a good bridge, if I may, between the so-called global north and the so-called global south, whatever these labels mean. But I mean, this is a very important trajectory where Brazil can play an active role.
To improve the resilience of our electric system, would you say that a good plan is to keep investing in renewables, but at the same time invest in gas-powered plants?
I mean, the simple answer is yes, absolutely. I think we have to continue promoting renewables, but let me elaborate a little bit on renewables. I think renewables is not just electric renewables, it's also gaseous renewables, first point. Second point, gas-fired power plants are essential to keep the stability of the systems. We are seeing more and more the complexity of managing a renewables-driven electricity system, especially when electricity from renewables is not just hydro, but is coupled by solar and wind, which are much more variable. So variability is to be managed. gas is flexible. Gas is the power of flexibility implemented in the power system, among other things.
And how is the IGU involved in the mobilization for the G20 in Rio in the late of the year?
Well, we are having good conversations with the local stakeholders, with the policymakers. I think we are having a very important engagement in making clear what the role of gas can be in many different occasions and respects of the differentiation of countries. Here IGU plays a role in making available documents, reports. I mentioned the global gas report, we had the LNG report, we have other reports, and I think we are really pursuing a better engagement at large in the public domain. I think the IGU can be a good partner because we are open to dialogue, we are open to conversations, we are trying to bring the pragmatism of our industry, complementing that with the vision of long-term trajectories and targets that we have. But at the same time, again, the backbone and the DNA of our industry is to deliver. I normally say that we deliver while innovating. So that's where I think IGU can bring a good angle for the G20 discussions. As we had also similar discussions at the G7 level. I'm Italian, and we had the Italian leadership of G7 this year. So we had a good conversation there. And I think back to your earlier question about security, volatility, I think here we have to be sure about the fact that energy is available all the time, because that is protecting the interest of producers and consumers. Volatility is not good for anybody, not even for governments.
And the biomethane market in Brazil is beginning to take consistent steps. And how can the natural gas and biomethane markets complement each other?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because that requires me to go back in my history. I was starting the biomethane development in Italy 10 years ago. So the natural gas industry had to understand, first of all, the biomethane case, because it was different. But I think the cultural change has happened and is moving fast. I think Brazil, if I may again use another anecdote, I go back 2 years ago when we had the first stakeholder dialogue meeting in Rio de Janeiro with IGU and other local stakeholders. And at that very moment, biomethane was the new kid in town, if you allow me. Now I see much more solid proposition there. So we have to continue. We have to ramp up. We have to scale up dimensionally these new energies. But I think the gas industry has all the capacity in terms of technical, market, policy knowledge to best support these developments.
And Andrea, you will be the president of the IGU for the 2025-2028 term. And what will be your main objectives in this position?
Thanks for the question. It is very intriguing because, of course, we have to keep an eye on being pragmatic, as I was saying before, while keeping the vision at the same time. So my intention for the IGU would be to be a more recognizable partner in every kind of discussion with respect to energy developments and energy evolution. I'm not using transition. Why so? Because transition maybe is too simplistic. My transition is from no glasses to glasses. So I'm needing glasses because of my age. That's a fact of life. With energy, we have to be aware of the fact that things will not be linear, will not be simple. In that respect, IGU can bring a lot of expertise, wealth of knowledge, and having the possibility to share best practices that we are having in different places of the world and different parts of the value chain. So that's where I think the IGU can play a very important role going forward.
In a few words, Andreas, what is the future of the gas market and the future of energy?
Well, with energy, it's very simple. We are needing more energy, and more is coming. Let me give you an example. According to some estimations, AI, artificial intelligence, in the US alone, will require more energy, electricity especially, that is equivalent to 40 million homes today. So we are not even aware of things happening. And this is true for developed world, but is even more true for developing world, where developing world is having an access problem today, where the gas or energy at large utilization is very, very low. Gas has a very important role to play there. And it's not a transitional role. Transitional roles are somehow very difficult for me to talk about. I think we have a very long-term projections. Of course, technology will develop. We have market development. But I think we are here to serve, again, the needs of the consumers and the population of today and tomorrow. That's where, back to my quote of innovation, it's very important that the gas industry will continue innovating all of the time. But at the same time, we have to arrive to these trajectories and targets that we are having in the long term. 2050 is still a long way to go. And let me be clear on one point. 2050 is an important date, but it's more important how the trajectory up to 2050 will be done. In that respect, in the last 35 years, we have had only three times in our history where emissions decreased. 1990, dissolution of the Soviet Union. 2008, Lehman crisis. And unfortunately, 2020, COVID. I think this demonstrates the fact that gas has an important role to play going forward to be part of the energy mix and reducing emissions.
Chega ao final essa edição do Poder Entrevista. Em nome do jornal digital Poder 360, eu agradeço a Andrea Stegher pela entrevista. Andrea, thank you very much for this interview.
Muito obrigado. Next time, possibly, I will be having a few words in Portuguese. That's my challenge. But I hope it was a useful conversation, and I'm very happy to have this possibility to explore more about the energy. I think we have to deliver more good information to the public at large, because sometimes it's just ignorance somehow, or better said, is our industry role that is not playing the full game. So, many thanks again.
Eu agradeço também a todos os web espectadores que assistiram a este programa. Esta entrevista foi gravada no estúdio do Poder 360, em Brasília, em 11 de setembro de 2024. Para ficar sempre bem informado, inscreva-se no canal do Poder 360, ative as notificações e não perca nenhuma informação relevante. Muito obrigado e até a próxima.
Poder Monitor, a ferramenta mais completa para monitorar os três poderes. Acesse agora poder.cc/monitor e ganhe 30 dias grátis.